Our keynote this morning will be a leadership conversation with Frank Bell, founder of Inspire CIO, and Dale Jones, senior advisor and former CEO of Diversified Search Group. While they take the stage, let's learn a little bit more about Dale.
Born in Dallas, Texas, Dale Jones had two brothers. His dad was a shoe repairman by day and a janitor by night. Dale and his brothers often went to work with their dad on weekends to help clean office buildings. Working to provide for his family as a young widower, Dale's father taught Dale to grow through sufferings. Through Dale's time in high school and earning his degree at Morehouse College, his dad was struggling with a terminal illness. This was another example of a trial in Dale's life that he used to make himself better, not bitter. After graduation, Dale started his career in banking. But when a mentor moved into the executive recruiting business, Dale followed and joined Lamely Amrob as a partner in 1996. In 1999, Dale moved to Heydrich & Struggles, where he served as managing partner of the Atlanta office until 2007. He consulted CEOs and corporate boards on human capital issues, including recruiting, retention, succession planning, and corporate governance. In 2007, Dale relocated with his family to Washington, D.C., where he worked for Revolution LLC as the executive vice president. Revolution LLC is a venture-backed firm founded by Steve and Jean Case that funded efforts to provide clean drinking water to Africa. Following a 3-year stint in D.C., Dale returned to Heydrich & Struggles, where he led the firm's CEO and board practice in North America. In 2013, Dale became the CEO of Diversified Search, where he became one of the world's top CEOs and board leadership consultants. He led their mission of identifying, assessing, and recruiting CEOs, board directors, and senior leaders who create value and grow companies to onboarding, integration, and cultural transformation. Dale remains a major shareholder and senior advisor to this day. He currently serves as CEO of Magna Vista Partners LLC, a global consulting firm. In 2020, Dale was honored with the Award of Excellence by the Association of Executive Search Consultants, the industry's highest honor. Dale has been a corporate board member for a number of organizations. He volunteers his time serving on boards with not-for-profit roles. He contributes regularly as a speaker and instructor at Georgetown University. Dale and his wife, Yolanda, live in D.C. and are the proud parents of their son, Jordan, and daughter, Kennedy. Dale's advice is to be counterintuitive around what success looks like and how you attain it. Rethink success, which may be different than the current standard. Please welcome Dale Jones.
Well, good morning. You're in for a treat this morning. Dale Jones is one of the brightest and most well-connected executives that I know. And it's a pleasure to be here with you, Dale. We've known each other for a while, 30 years?
For a long time. And the one missing piece of the story was I was running a not-for-profit around the Olympics, and your mother was my chairman. And so a lot of what I learned from your mom, who was my first chairman of an organization. And back then, I think you were a radical high schooler. So yeah, I'm dating myself.
Yeah. I've gotten in trouble once or twice before making Mr. Bill videos. Well, Dale, let's talk about leadership and talent development, and identifying talent. You made a career out of the talent business. CEOs, board chairs. What are the leadership attributes that you look for when you're working on a project?
Well, there are a number of attributes that many of you could even fill the sheet on. But the former chairman of McKinsey once said to me that if I'm looking for a leader, one of the things we want to know, is if a leader, if she or he has ever had a failed rung in their lives. And I said to Al McDonald, that wasn't the answer I was looking for amongst attributes. But he said to me, leaders who have been bathed in the crucible of crisis, adversity, personal and professional challenges, have learned something about how to lead. And they've learned to draw on resources internally that give them the ability to empathize, to inspire, to motivate, and to really be vulnerable as leaders. And so I've had a first row seat over the last 25 years to the boardrooms of corporate America and not-for-profits and healthcare systems and IT organizations. And I'll tell you, his advice was right on, because too often people get hired for leadership competencies, but they get fired or derailed for leadership deficiencies. And so what I have found, even in my own story of growing up, that there are things I learned as a young man, as a boy, growing up in Dallas, that my dad taught me about having a work ethic, cleaning buildings, although I think today he'd probably be penalized for child labor laws, because we were, I was 8 years old and we were cleaning country clubs in North Dallas. But I don't think he cared much about the labor laws. Right. So there are attributes, Frank, that oftentimes I think are understated and not looked at, that are important in finding a leader who's able to inspire and motivate and really build high-performing teams. And it's more intrinsic, it's more internal than it is just external.
Well, that's good. Yeah, certainly the value of hard work, cleaning at an early age, taught you some things, didn't it?
Absolutely, very much so. And we're hoping that we pass it on to our children. Our daughter, who's in graduate school, got her first paycheck the other day, and she says, "Dad, who is Mr. FICA? and what is he doing with my money?" Right. I said, "Honey, you're on your way to becoming a conservative." She says, "No way, Dad." Of course, she's at Brown University, so she's probably not going to be a conservative. Right.
Well, in your bio, you talk about authentic leaders. So tell us a little bit about the word and the context of search, and when you're interviewing prospective CEOs and board members.
So over the 25 years, I've always asked leaders to tell me their story in the interview process. And invariably, they begin reciting their resumes. And I'll say, I don't need you to repeat the resume, and I've got LinkedIn. I want to know your story, because it's in the context of your story that I understand your value system, what's important to you, how you make decisions, how you think about the world, how you understand how you bring things together, and how have you navigated through the crucible moments of your life and lessons learned that would enable you to be a leader in an organization, particularly when you have to navigate in difficult times. And so this authentic piece is more than just about the success you've had. It's the failures and the disappointments and the struggles and the resiliency that you've had through difficult experiences, or just being stretched. Sometimes folks are blessed not to have the crisis that I had or others may have had, but they've allowed themselves to work in environments that have stretched them, where they've gone to another country to work, a different language, or different religious experience. And so I have found that the authentic leader is able to tell their story, know their story, tell their story, and talk about the lessons they've learned from the experiences they've had that have really shaped their life and worldview.
That's so interesting. What tips would you give our audience in terms of, their career path and things that they could do for growth and development?
Well, I believe that change happens from within, and change within really changes everybody else. Most leaders are working on the analytical and the technical piece, because those are the table stakes, right? You don't get in the door without those. But then how do you work on who I am as an individual and a leader, and how do I become a better person in the context of that? And so I've been advising a group called Academy Within out of Atlanta that's just getting started up. Horst Schultz, the founder of Four Seasons Hotel, is a mentor there. And we're trying to help leaders understand their story, understand how they can become a more authentic leader, and build high-performing teams as a result of who they are and how they're wired. Brene Brown, many of you have read of her work, and she talks about how vulnerability and having high emotional intelligence and empathy are critical to leadership. Well, most of us don't want to be vulnerable. Right. Most of us don't want to sort of go there. But the emphasis of the word vulnerability, or the etymology of it, the word vulnerability means wounded. It means woundedness. None of us want to go back to the wounds that have helped shaped us or made us bitter or better in some level. But but that's the very essence of what needs to happen, is to understand the experiences we've had, how they've shaped our lives, and how they've given us a lens in which we view the world. And some of that needs to be reshaped, because some of us are carrying bitterness. Some of us are carrying a lot of baggage. The one thing I say about my father, who became a widower early on and then raised 3 sons, is that he never saw himself as a victim. He never felt sorry for himself and blamed others for the plight that he had been delivered, to be a widower at the age of 45 and raise 3 sons and then have a terminal illness at the age of 48. And so what happens is, how do we take those experiences we've all had at different levels? It may not be life or death. It may be divorce, or it may be a setback on the job. It may be feeling not valued. But how do we take those experiences and grow and learn from them so that it makes us better as leaders?
Wow. You said at the outset that most leaders are hired for their technical competency, but then often fired for leadership deficiencies. What are the derailers that you can tell us about that people should watch for?
Well, one is the old adage, derailer of ego. We all have a healthy dose of it, and the question is, how do we manage it? There's a sacred proverb that says, humility comes before honor, but pride comes before the fall. And what happens with success for each of us in this room is that we begin to believe that we are the authority, that it begins and ends with us. And we all know that there's some leaders who may be in their 50s or 60s or 40s, and they still carry on like they're in their teenagers.
Yeah.
And so the growth of leadership isn't just chronological, because what we have found is that some leaders, their growth becomes arrested. They stop growing. They stop growing as a leader. Jim Collins talks about level 5 leaders. And I've seen in the boardroom and in the C-suite that leaders stop growing because they stop getting in touch with their stories, and they stop leaning into those hard moments where they can grow and become better in the context of what they do. And so change is within, and the change within impacts change everywhere. So we've got to become better at managing self and leading self with self-care and understanding how who we are and how we're created and wired helps us be better, or how do we get better to be strong leaders. So I've seen derailers, and ego tends to be number one. The lack of emotional intelligence is another. The lack of empathy, caring for people. I was reading an article the other day where the writer was saying, we need to learn how to listen with our heart. We listen with our ears, but too often in the listening, we're trying to figure out how we're going to respond to people as opposed to understanding what we've heard. And so there are ways in which we as leaders can grow, but it's about managing the ego. It's about sort of others first, as one of the awardees was quoting Mother Teresa about others. And that doesn't come natural.
Right.
It's really about us. And the truth is that it's not really about us. It's about how do we serve others and how do we help others become more successful in the context of what they're doing.
That's great. Let's talk about mentoring for a second, both the role of mentoring others. If you're leading an organization, that becomes a little bit obvious that it's your role as a leader to mentor your team and to bring others up. But the value of being mentored. I think you have seen CEOs at the highest level of business and on boards still have mentors.
Yes.
So just talk about kind of the up and down of mentoring.
Yeah. Well, it's important for us to know that we're not on the journey alone. And too often we feel the pressure that I've got to demonstrate that I can do this without any help. Many CEOs I know have an executive coach or someone in their kitchen cabinet they call upon to get advice. That to me is a statement of humility, because it means I can't do it by myself. The other thing too is not only are we to get mentored or to be coached, but we too should become mentors for others. And then to take it a step further, you can be a mentor, but it's also important to be a sponsor. A sponsor means that you're giving up something in order to help somebody else. When I got into the executive recruiting business 25 years ago, the guy that recruited me into the business, he was a mentor, but then he said, come join me. And to come join him meant that he was giving up something of time and resources to help develop me and invest in my future. And so what we're finding, because oftentimes we don't see as many women as we want in leadership or people of color in leadership. And the question is, what are we doing to mentor and to
Right.
bring others along in the journey of growth and access? So mentoring is important, but I think it's important for us to be mentored and to be a mentor.
Right.
And then take it further and say, how do I sponsor somebody? What am I willing to give up to invest in someone else's success so that they can come alongside after me? You talked about the next generation of leaders, which you guys are doing here, which I think is commendable.
Yeah, we're excited about that. It's over 500 IT leaders from around the country have participated in that program, and it's just a great way to tell people they're important by starting them into a program, and then they're mentored by CIOs all over the country that often say, I get more out of the mentoring than the students do.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's insightful to them and inspires their leadership. So that's
Yes.
a pretty cool dynamic. It's this virtuous cycle.
Yes. Well, I've even recruited a couple of CIOs who were folks who were CIOs in their past, and they became CEOs. I recruited a guy who was the CIO of MBNA and then the technology leader at Bank of America. And we put him in a bank. And who knew when we recruited him to that role many years ago, how fundamentally the digital space would be overturned from brick and mortar to how we wire and transfer money through Zelle and so forth. And he was the right person for the right time, a little bit ahead of his time, because people would say, what do we need a CIO to run an organization like this? And he was the perfect individual to bring growth and innovation at a time when the banking sector needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe that there are many of you in the room who are technology leaders, but you're also bound to be the CEO or the COO of organizations because technology is the plum. Every company today is a technology company. And I've said to my clients, if you don't see yourself as that, you're headed out of business.
Right. That is so true. Over the last 50 years, I think more CEOs have kind of come from the finance role of understanding the finance and capital markets and private equity and all that, the sort of the black box of finance. But I do think that in the next 50 years, I'd be interested in your opinion, the next 50 years, that role is going to be more technology black box of those that understand technology, not so much the bits and the bytes, but the strategy of how technology can be competitively used in the marketplace, that technology leaders have a great shot at being the predominant role for the next 50 years.
Yes, because what we know, sorry to call you your brother's name, Frank Allen, Frank. What we know is that if the rate of external change is greater than the rate of internal change, it's a going out of business proposition. And technology has been at the forefront of enabling the external change that needs to happen in the marketplace. And so you can't escape it if you're not technologically enabled and innovative around what the future will bring. And so I agree wholeheartedly with the statement. I think, unfortunately, there's some companies that have not, caught up with the train as it's moving. I'm sitting here next to one of the awardees here talking about Dubai and Abu Dhabi, where we've been. And those in the United Emirates, you go into Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and you realize the future is now in those two Emirates because they have leaped on innovation and technology in a monumental way. And we've got to do that more so even in this country. We've done some of it, but we've got to do a lot more to keep up with other parts of the world.
Well, great. Well, in closing here, what last piece of advice would you have for these CIOs that aspire to CEO roles or board roles after their CIO career?
I would say lean into the moment of how do I make me better? How do you make you better? And invest in those areas where you need to grow and become better. It's about self-leadership that enables you to inspire others and build high-performing teams. And whether that's a course or whether it's through mentorship or whether it's through small groups, find ways to invest in your own personal development beyond the technical. The technical you've got. You all are here and being awarded, and celebrated because of the technical. You're also here and awarded because you've got the leadership as well. But as the world evolves, we all have to sharpen our tools and be much better at what we do, and allow others of us to see us not as the technocrats, but to see us as the innovators of change for the future.
Love that.
Because that's where the growth will come from, is to be innovators of change for the future that will enable companies to grow and prosper.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here this morning and sharing
Thank
your
you.
leadership wisdom with us. I
Great,
appreciate
Frank.
it.
Enjoyed you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.